So, man, it's nice out, isn't it?
I know. Finally.
I, yeah. Well, I mean, it is March. It is the second of March, and we got 50 degrees. I mean, like, you know, what? I don't know how much more we could ask for in March. This should be
Right.
end of March, not beginning of March.
True. True. True.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I'll take it.
yeah. So I went out for a walk uh, before we got on the call, and I've got shorts and a t-shirt on and a hat because I'm bald. But uh, like everybody else in my neighborhood's walking around like they're a bunch of Eskimos dressed up like there's going to be a blizzard. It was so funny, and they're all looking at me like weird, and I'm like, you know, 3 weeks ago it was 15.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so today is this conversation that we're going to have today is kind of near and dear to my heart because it's really how I got to where I am currently in my career. So, I mean, you know my backstory, but I'll tell it really quick for people who don't know it. Went to massage therapy school in '97. Started practicing in 2000. I worked for a chiropractor for about 9 months, and I did pre and post adjustment massages. I worked at a racket club, and then this is like 2000, so like sports massage and deep tissue is like still kind of finding its way. You couldn't go to every salon, and massage envy didn't exist at that time. So and massage at that time was really thought more of as a luxury than it was as an adjunct to to healthcare plans. And in Michigan, everybody was still on insurance. They weren't like because everybody was still on like you know Cadillac multi-platinum GM Ford Chrysler insurance. So people weren't. A lot of people were still getting most of everything paid for by the insurance companies. So and then so in 2000, I started practicing. I tried to become a relaxation massage therapist. I was terrible at it because I talk too damn much. I have a better chance of knocking you out with my water bottle than I do of putting you to sleep with a massage. And I just wanted to solve problems and injuries. So one of the things that I see a lot, and I mean, also how we met through NKT, I was always trying to solve problems for people, and I would get very frustrated when uh, I couldn't solve a problem. And when sticking my elbow into something and holding on until the cows came home didn't solve the problem because again, I wasn't a good relaxation massage therapist, so I had to find something else to sell. And so the only other thing than that is, uh, you know, you got to be good at helping people recover from injuries. And um, one of the best successes I had, and I haven't thought about this till recently, was one of the longest standing clients, the longest standing client, my very first client that I established in 2000. I worked with him from 2000 to 2015, and he had scoliosis. And in the beginning of me working with him, his name was Bill. About 6 months in, I started to notice Bill. So Bill's scoliosis, he had scoliosis, and his scoliosis was pretty like his S curve was pretty. It was pretty S, right? It wasn't like this. It was like really, and his right lower erectors or his right lower back muscles had atrophied or hadn't actually developed. So there was a difference. You could actually physically see them. And about 6 months into working with him, we first worked through a hip injury that took me like ages to figure out. By the way, at that time, when we first started working, about 6 months in, I started to notice the tissue start to grow back in his right lower back, and I didn't understand. I'm like, what the hell? But he had gotten so much more range of motion. He worked at a grocery store. He managed the frozen food department in a grocery store. And so I said to him, I'm like, hey, I might be just crazy here, but has your wife said anything to you about your lower back? like the tissue starting to come back in? And he's like, yeah, as a matter of fact. And over the period of time, like his S curve was so much significantly reduced. But a large part of what we did along with that, because we were in the racket club, he worked out. He knew I worked out because I knew him from my previous job, and so I would help him with some of his exercise programming. Now, fast forward 25 years later, here I am, right? And the reason I got here was because I was very frustrated by clients who would leave feeling good, and then 2 days later, everything came back. And so I just started working with one of the amateur fighters from the gym, and he's got, it's hilarious. He has a calf issue, but he has weakness and his legs feel heavy he's like, as he gets into sparring. And, but he has a previous history of a low back issue. And he's seeing another professional, right? And I said, bro, you don't have a calf issue. You have a back issue that's manifesting down into your calves, right? And so we actually just sent him out his program today. I'm really excited about working with him. But I would get really frustrated. Or even worse would be they felt good, but that felt terrible after I worked on it, right? And I couldn't solve this problem. And it took me, quite a long time to figure out a lot of why that was. And so today, what we want to talk about is we want to talk about kind of like that quote unquote 48-hour fix. You have these ongoing problems, and maybe you go get an adjustment, maybe you go get a massage, maybe you go spin around in a circle and hang from a pole, whatever it is. But things don't feel like there's no resolution to it. It's really you're just chasing fixes. And the frustrating part of that is that I feel like this is where a lot of people 40 plus live at, right? They're really just managing the symptoms. And for better or worse, people have really discounted, and I used to do it, they discounted strength training and the impact that strength training can have on people and the impact that it can have on their lives. But now when I sit back and think about it, and I think about like, okay, so all of the people that I know that are, we'll say 70, 75 plus, that are still really active, so many of them are doing some form of resistance training. And as we get older, 40 plus, it's so important that we do resistance training because we need to combat the muscle loss that happens, but B, for our joint health and for our bone density, and obviously particularly with women, this is a really big problem post menopause. Like bone density and osteoporosis and osteopenia. And then something that Marcia said to me one time when we were at the studio, we used to get together and hang out on Friday afternoons and work on each other and just kind of like shoot the shit and, oh, hey, I was thinking about this. What do you think about this? She was talking about, one of the reasons also that as we get older, that our joints get more brittle is because we're not actually loading the joint. Right. And when I was kind of looking into a lot of ATG, that was one of the things that that stuck out to me in one of her and my previous conversations was that you're not loading the joint, and how can you expect that bone and that joint to be strong and resilient if it hasn't been loaded in 10, 15, 20 years, right? And I mean, think about like the idea of breaking the head of your femur, but it happens quite often as people get older. Like if people really understood what the femur looked like and the thickness and the density of that bone, it's incredible, right? So we want to look at that idea of why do we have these problems that continue to circle back around. And in the 5-day challenge, as you know, we talk a lot about pelvis, rib cage, and skull. And in the upgrade, the elite part of the program, the VIP part of the program, we talk about how the shoulders, knees, and ankles tie into all of that as well. And my wife's niece is dealing with some headaches, and she's seeing a PT and a chiropractor at the same time, which is hilarious because you might as well put cats and dogs and uh,
Yeah.
religious and atheists together in the same room, right? Because they're going to fight and they're going to argue with each other. But one of the things that the Cairo told my Mallory, my wife's niece, was that she has scoliosis, and I'm like, okay, well, what are we doing about this? What are we actually doing with it? Okay, great. You have an X-ray. You have this degree of curvature. Fantastic. Like, what are we doing with it? You know, and so, but I'm not getting involved in that because I'm not adding myself into that because it I don't want to fight everybody's differing agreements. I said, when you get done with PT, we'll talk. Like when everybody releases you and says you're good, we'll talk. And so, but a lot of that can be solved with strength training, but listening to your body through it, right? And so when you first start out with stuff and you're really weak, and regardless, if you've never split squat before, unless you're deep into Olympic lifting, where you're doing really super deep squats, you're going to be relatively weak and unstable because you haven't got into that full knee flexion. And so part of the strength training and the mobility, see, I put mobility and strength training in the same thing. Whereas before, if we would have talked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have taken mobility and strength training and put them into opposite buckets. Because I thought of mobility as crawling around on the floor like an animal, like, through some of those other programs. And it's not that that's not a form of mobility, because it is, right? You're loading yourself and getting into deep ranges of motion so that the joint can handle it. The problem with that a lot of times is that's kind of like, it's like moving yoga on the ground. And again, if you haven't got into those deep ranges of motion, your joint and particularly the tendons and ligaments may not have the capacity to handle those deep ranges of motion. And there's no regressions to that then, right? Oh, well, you just don't do it as much. Well, there's a massive difference with my elbow bent here and my elbow bent back here for my shoulder and the ability to handle it. And yeah, maybe I might be able to get to handle it over 15 years, but who in the hell has time for that, right? So like when I look at strength training, I don't even separate them out anymore. And it's the hardest conversation I have with people. Like when I was meeting with the fighter I was talking to on Friday, I'm like, dude, you're stretching and doing all these things. I'm like, what if we could just do a lot of that all at once? Like, how much time would that save you? And also like how about we start to get you stronger through these ranges of motion? Because I guarantee it's going to have a huge performance carryover. So, the thing that we want to look at is we want to stop looking so much at like the symptoms and start looking at the root cause. And again, like we talk about in the challenge, and we'll talk about it in the upcoming webinar a little bit, is the way that your skeleton is carrying itself is really. And let's pretend you have shoulder pain and you're so far internally rotated in your shoulders, you look like a gorilla, right? And I can't get my arm above my head. Really? Boy, that's a surprise. Well, what would happen if we brought the shoulder back? And there's no amount of stretching that's going to bring the shoulder back over a long term. We have to strengthen the muscles that bring the shoulder back, and then also that support the shoulder blade as well. And then start to load that tissue into deeper ranges so that the tissue can get stretched out again and we can get some more blood flow in there. So, the reason I got here and the reason I, drink the Kool-Aid so damn hard is because I've seen it myself and I've tried to dig it out, right? I'm really good with my elbow, right? But like I could never get rid of this for people. And nobody could ever get rid of this for me, right? I remember when I hosted David Weinstock, he's like, "Oh, well, you have this internal rotation on my shoulder." I'm like, yeah, I know. I spent that was 2012. I'm like, I've been doing massage for the last 12 years. I've been doing martial arts for the last 2012 for the last 17 years. I have a pretty good reason to keep my shoulder internally rotated when somebody's trying to punch me in the face. So, if you can get rid of it for me, great. But recognize that I'm going to put that shoulder back there again tomorrow.
Mhm.
And so, nobody was able to answer that question for me and make positioning functional, really, you know. So, yeah, that's something I've been thinking about quite a bit recently. Is why do people kind of cycle around to all of these treatments and all of these interventions, right? And not really find the long-term success that they're looking for. And I think a lot of it is because the idea of strength training, everybody thinks of one thing, right? They just think about, oh, you're trying to do CrossFit or bodybuild or powerlift or whatever it is. There's no rehabilitative nature to that. And when progressed well and treated as more of mobility as than just pure strength training, it can have a huge restorative factor in the body. So I know you have some thoughts on that because I know that you were just talking about your shoulders earlier on in the week, right?
Yep. Yep.
So talk a little bit about that.
Well, because like you, my shoulders have become very internally rotated over the years, even though
Yep.
I feel like I'm strong, in my upper body, but
Yep.
um, but when I started doing all the shoulder work and especially the rotator cuff exercises and how hard those are with light weights,
Right.
but what a profound difference has made on my posture and my shoulders already.
Yeah. 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 And it's funny because what you'll start to notice too, as 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 you gain more mobility and as you gain greater range of motion back, then what you'll notice is you'll have tissue development. Um, Muscle starts to come back because now
Yep.
you have it's not operating from this range of motion back here anymore. It's operating from this back here, and the joint is able to go to greater ranges of motion.
Yep.
So, and we need a combination of that short and long range strength. You know,
Right.
um, yeah, yeah. And then you were saying that your push-ups have gotten better, huh?
Yeah, they have. Yep. Yeah,
And,
because I
and
have this range of motion to go back without going back and doing this.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
without really internally rotating a bunch. And then what happens when you internally rotate and you're trying to bring your elbow back, you're just jamming into that shoulder socket.
Does not feel good. It hurts.
No, 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 no. Yeah,
Everything. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah. For a long time, I had a hard time with that as well. I would. It got to the point where, and it was so funny because my buddy Jamie, when I was powerlifting, I have so many positive benefits from powerlifting for me. Um, but one of the things that I think back upon now, and it's we just didn't know any better, right? I mean, like, this isn't through any fault of anybody's. It wasn't through the fault of my coaches, who, by the way, I still have a relationship with and I still talk to, you know, 32 years later, right? When we go back home to Michigan, I have breakfast with them a couple times when we go back home. So Mr. G is basically part of my family. Um, but you know, in 94 or 93, nobody knew anything about internal and external shoulder rotation in any weightlifting programs. You know, um, nobody knew anything about that. You know, oh, those were these movements here that were things that people in physical therapy did. These were for
Right.
weak people,
Yeah.
right? Or these are for bodybuilders. We're not bodybuilders and we're not weak people. How do we know? Watch. We're not weak. But I got so internally rotated up here, right? And then so now when you watch people deadlift, they do something called a hook grip deadlift. So they take their thumb and they pinch, it hurts like the devil. They pinch their thumb in between the bar and they hook grip here. Um, when I learned to deadlift, you deadlifted over under. So you
Yeah.
had uh,
Yep.
typically typically your weak arm was under, and then, like, you know, if you were really fancy and progressive and smart on your warm-up sets, you'd flip the other way, right? If you were really sophisticated, you know, many of us weren't sophisticated, by the way. So but I developed a pretty big difference between my right and left side of my spinal erectors because of my hand placement. And again, we didn't know any better. And I developed a rotation in my squat for a period of time. I had to like regress my squat back and learn how to squat again without a rotation. When I would get, when I would get, when I was, if it was heavy on the way down, I would start to rotate a little bit. And then, or if it was really heavy out of the hole, I would rotate out of the hole like that just a little bit. And, but now I know it's because of my hand placement, right? So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of interesting things that you know, the last 10 to 15 years we've can be learned now, and because information travels so freely, there's not guarded secrets any longer. You know, you can't keep something under wraps with the internet. So, you know, I think it's really pretty cool. But it definitely for people who are out there that are struggling with the, you know, hey, look, I just can't solve this problem. I have this injury and I can't figure it out. And oftentimes what happens is we need to go backwards a little bit. We need to regress back a little bit. So, like you were saying, you felt like you were pretty strong, and you are pretty strong given your age, your size, you know, all of the things. You know, you're probably in the 5 to 10 to 5 percentile of your age, gender, and size because of the work that you've done. But that doesn't mean that all of you is strong,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
you know. And when we start to look at the weak, when we start to look at pain or limitation not as a limitation, really, we start to look at it as, oh man, we've got. I remember I heard Ben Patrick say this the first time. He said this to someone when he was doing a bunch of YouTube stuff, and they're like, "Man, I just can't do that." And he's like, "Yeah, you can't do that, but you can do this. Think about how much better you'll be able to do to do this, which is the thing that you want to do when you're able to do this, right?" So that pain or that lack of performance can really be a catalyst for us to have pretty profound improvements and performance improvements of whatever, you know, you're performing at. It doesn't matter, you know, whether it's hiking or there's a guy I know in the ATG coaching group. He's blown up in pickleball. You know, whatever those things are, the more that we address and also address them to the place where it's appropriate to you, right? So, you know, not everybody is going to, nor do they need to, nor do they have the interest in like exploring the full capacity of things. You know, like if you're like, my wife has an interest in getting stronger, but she's really more interested about being able to, um, you know, be strong as she gets older. So like she doesn't chase numbers very much, or like she doesn't really have performance metrics. I'll come out here and she'll be doing something like, holy crap, that's pretty good. She's like, oh, is it really? I don't know. I'm just doing the thing, right? And so, you know, I think we need to also recognize that like what I'm going to do and what I think is important and what you're going to do and what you think is important isn't necessarily, um, those aren't those aren't the metrics that we should be really judging a program or the outcomes after. It's how do you feel, how do you move, and are you able to do the things that you want to do and not have a problem later on, right?
Yep.
So, yeah. So, any thoughts or anything you'd like to add, Sonia, as my faithful co-host?
Well, we just moved my mother into
Yeah,
assisted, and I cannot believe the decline with her. Well, so it's probably been going on for a year. She was getting around with a walker, and then she started feeling unsteady and unstable, and she had a couple falls. So she ditched the walker and she just sits all day.
yeah,
And
yeah,
now her legs are so weak, they will not
yeah,
support her. They,
yeah,
it's just horrible.
yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I watched my grandma. I watched that my mom's mom. I watched that happen to my mom's mom. She had two girls. She had two ladies, older ladies in the neighborhood. She lived in this condo community, and Betty and Grace and my grandma all kind of moved in at the same time, and they were within each other's age, plus minus five, 3 to 7 years, somewhere in there, right? And they would go for walks around the neighborhood, and then Grace fell and she hurt her hip. And I think eventually they put her in a care facility because she just never could seem to recover. And then because Grace wasn't going out to take a walk, my grandma would just walk over to Betty's, and then they would have happy hour. And then, then they wouldn't go for a walk because they had happy hour.
Right.
And yeah, and then eventually I can't remember what happened to Betty. I think she moved out. And then my grandma didn't have anybody, and so then she would just watch TV. She got a cat and would just watch TV, and then,
Yeah,
yeah, it's pretty sad.
it is. It's like if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic way to close out the whole entire call, because really that's the goal for me and what I'm building is, like I want to help people stay healthy and active so they don't
Yep.
have to, for as long as they possibly can, because eventually at some point in time it's going to happen,
Right.
right?
Right.
But damn it, we should fight it for as long as we possibly can. And it's
Yes.
not. I'm not going to say that it's not that hard, because it is. There's effort in it. There's
Yeah.
consistency. There's some discipline in it. There's some habit building in it. But it's not as difficult as well. I mean, if you get to the place where your mom is, then that becomes difficult, right?
Right.
But if you're anywhere before that, I don't care
Yeah.
what age you are,
Yep.
right?
Right.
It's not that hard to get out and go for a walk, right?
Right. Yep.
So,
Yep.
well, I'm gonna pop off here because I got a call I got to get on at 5:30 here. So, but Sonia, I appreciate you being my co-host again. Thanks for spending the time with me, and I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks,
All right,
Sean.
thanks, Sonia. Bye bye.